Hello everybody, it's the Warhipster here, coming at you with another Contrast Plus painting tutorial, and today we're doing things slightly differently because, well, this video is about an Araknae Quad Accelerator Platform, which is the different thing. But there's more differences going on because I'm recording this voiceover from the future, because, well, I filmed this during the heatwave recently, and the aircon is so punishingly loud you can't actually hear anything, so I'm having to do this from the future. Anyway, Games Workshop sent me the Araknae Quad Accelerator Platform, to give it its full title again, to build up and paint for all of you. And, well, I thought this would be an interesting challenge because they've shared a lot of reference photos for things like the Saturnine Terminators from the new Saturnine box, and the Saturnine Dreadnought, and the Praetors, and indeed the Mark II Tactical Marines? I think they're Mark IIs. Anyway, the veterans as well, but they haven't shared many pictures of the Araknae Quad Accelerator kit painted in anything other than the Iron Warriors. In fact, as far as I can tell, I haven't seen any reference photos for it in anything other than the Iron Warriors. And they put it to me as a challenge to paint this as an Imperial Fist. Now, I thought, well, there's a cool video to be made here where we actually figure out how to paint it as an Imperial Fist, make it read as an Imperial Fist, but also be the kind of chunky, big, metallic gun emplacement that it actually is as well. So, how do we do that? Well, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to do that. And as you can see, I've already started because I didn't plan myself accordingly as I was doing this. It was like 38 degrees in my studio, so my brain was soup at the time of doing this. But, as you can see, we've already started, as we've already mentioned. Now, I decided to prime this one in Wraithbone because the key colour here is for Imperial Fist is obviously going to be the yellow. And we want that yellow to be bright and impactful and have lots of warmth to it. And ultimately, because all of the sort of darker parts of the model, they're either going to be Black Legion or it's going to be a metallic, which is going to cover over the primer absolutely no problem. So rather than go for like a grey sear, which would give us that sort of coldness that you would kind of expect more from the Horus Heresy, we went with Wraithbone just to get a really nice kind of, well, sort of sun yellow, not a sunset yellow, that would be orange. Anyway, so we went with Wraithbone, and the colour I'm using here is, of course, Imperial Fist, because it would be absolutely rude not to. And this is because Imperial Fist is a single pigment contrast paint, and it goes on nice and simple, nice and quick, nice and smooth, because you don't have to worry too much about dark spotting like you would for something like Eandon Yellow, for example, which is where we have typically painted some of our Imperial Fists in the past. But this thing is absolutely massive. If you're a fan of the channel, you'll have seen a number of these videos over the years, and you'll have seen kind of how big like a 40mm base model is over the top of my logo there in the middle, as you can see, as I'm giving you lots of space to look at. Now, one of the things that was also interesting here is because Iron Warriors are silver in their main colour, as it were, and then their kind of heraldry aspect is the hazard striping, that's the word I'm looking for. Because of that, it means that on the one that we've actually got in terms of the picture references, the only thing you really see is the heraldry aspect of the Iron Warriors, and the rest of it is in silver. And there's two different types of silver going on here, and whilst we have a look at these in detail, you can see that just about there are some lighter silvers here and some darker silvers here, and there are some silvers that are just always going to be there. So for example, the barrels of the gun, they're going to be silver. The metallics of the kind of industrial parts of the weapon and of the platform itself, that's going to be silver. But what is the Legion color that's going on here? Well, I kind of determined that it would be these kind of ankles of the weapon itself, the base of the platform, because that's where we've got some heraldry in the form of the hazard striping, and then we've got the main kind of cockpit of the gun where presumably our marine is going to be sitting inside. That is also going to be of the heraldic colors. And well, we broke the model up into two parts, and we have the base with the legs, and we have the actual cockpit itself. Rather than try and do the whole thing at once, it's just kind of keep it in two parts so that we can just take it a section at a time. So here you can see on the actual cockpit and the guns itself is there is a brighter silver again on the sides of that kind of stripe down the middle from our reference photo where the Iron Warriors heraldry hazard stripes are, and of course the transfer as well for the logo for the Iron Warriors. Just decided that actually this bit's going to be yellow as well, and as a consequence that's going to help us lead our brush when we go round the back of the cockpit as to where we need to place some more yellow. I ended up making the lid of the cockpit yellow as well, but because we kind of often see with some Imperial Fist paint schemes that the kind of the shoulder, the pauldron itself, will be black as well. I think it's a veteran marking, but I'm not sure. Please do correct me in the comments if that's not correct, or if it's just one of the chapters of the Imperial Fists Legion. We just went for that to be black so that we have that kind of, well, the yellow and black of some of the schemes that I've seen in the past. So the kind of the front panel there, we're going to leave that, but we're going to do the whole of the ball joint of the cannon in the yellow. And there's some aspects as well of the roof that we will get to eventually in the video where we were going to do the yellow as well. In this case, it's a sort of trying to figure this out. It's just letting the brush lead me as to where I thought the yellow would actually work and where it would end and where it would stop. And you can see kind of from this angle that at the back there's some mechanical stuff like the big boxes which are presumably full of autocannon rounds. I thought they would be silver, but actually the rest of it we could probably just do with a bit of yellow. So negotiating the brush under here and around here and in the corners and on the underside, just kind of making sure that entire cockpit is yellow, and then just kind of letting the brush lead us as we go, really. Once all of our yellow is applied across the legs and across the cockpit or the turret itself, as you can see, just sort of showcasing where all of that actually goes, looking great. The move here is to actually shade it, and the reason being is that because it's such a big part of the model, it's such a large kind of feature color, if we get it shaded now, it means that we don't have to be more careful when we're shading it later once we've got all the silver on, because if we get all the silver and the black on, for example, and then we blob some shading over the top of it, you'll have a yellow patch in the shading, which we don't want. So we do the shading now, and the shade that I ended up going for was a roughly 1-to-1 mix of Casandora Yellow and Lahmian Medium. And, well, there's been a shift on the channel at some point to use more kind of Iyanden yellow because it's a stronger color and it gives us a stronger shading. However, because it's a contrast paint and we're going over such wide areas, it was actually just made more sense, rather than thinning down that Iyanden yellow a bit more than we would normally do, is to actually thin down a shade paint which is less strong and therefore would require less thinning. So 1-to-1 mix of Lahmian Medium and Casandora Yellow, and just chucking that over the top of all of the yellow in order to just get a little bit of orange in there, and also just kind of get some shading into those darker recesses around those armor panels. And just kind of, yeah, just get it over the top of the entire of the model. That's the reasoning behind it. Like I said, Iyanden Yellow is great for shading Imperial Fist. It's just a much stronger colour. And when you're doing it over infantry, absolutely fine, because they're smaller areas. And you can kind of go for like a 1-to-1 of Iyanden Yellow. That's not a problem. But going for such a large area, particularly on that base, doing that means we're going to get spotting, which means we're more likely to have to use a glaze or some sort of layering thing in order to correct any mistakes that would almost definitely be made. So going for that thinner paint in the shade and then actually just kind of thinning it down a little bit less just means the paint goes further and is just as effective. With all that yellow fully shaded, it's then time to move on to another colour, and well, we're keeping it with the contrast paint. I then went for some Black Legion. Black Legion is such a fantastic paint, and just it covers over so well, and rarely needs much more work than that. Of course, often I do shade it in order to give it just that little bit more punch, and actually that can sometimes smooth out just any kind of little kind of areas in the Black Legion where you might not have quite enough, so it starts to have that sort of little sort of brownish texture to it. But having just the sort of shade over the top generally just fixes that. And because so much of this model is going to be silver, it just made sense to use Black Legion and then to shade it with Nuln Oil, which we won't do now because we've got all that silver to do, and rather than create two steps where we use 2 amounts of Nuln Oil, just to use the Nuln Oil later, but we'll get to that later. So Black Legion is the next colour up, and we're using that over the top of that front shield, as I already talked about, kind of that heraldic element for the Imperial Fists. And the other element is the large casings of the guns, just like you would on a bolt gun for your standard tactical marines, or any other space marine unit, really. Like the heavy bolters on a tank, for example, we use the Black Legion for the casing of the weapon, and this is just the bit where there aren't any kind of mechanical details or anything like that. So here you go. We've also got the kind of suspensors, the kind of bit that squashes down when the autocannon fires. I think that's called suspension. It looks like the suspension springs on a bicycle, so we're applying that over the top of that as well, because that's a softer detail. So when the autocannon fires, the barrel decompresses that as well. So there you go. That's the 3 areas that the Black Legion is going to be applying on. This is why there's so much silver here, but I feel like it's already reading quite well as Imperial Fists. And once all of that Black Legion is applied over the top of, well, all of the areas that were going to be Black Legion, it's then time to apply more Iron Warriors over the top of a model than is strictly necessary in one go. Now, the reason we used Iron Warriors is because it's my favourite metallic, but as we've already mentioned, there's two different types of silver going on our picture reference. We've got that slightly brighter silver, and we've got that sort of heavier, darker silver. And Iron Warriors is perfect for the heavier, darker silver because it's the darkest silver paint that Games Workshop makes. And it means that there's less of a journey to come down in order to get some kind of depth to it than there is from, say, Lead Belcher. If we were to use Lead Belcher or Iron Hand Steel even, or something else, it becomes quite bright. So in order to get that real depth into the metallic, we then have to use a stronger shade. And a stronger shade would be something like some thinned down Black Templar, or indeed 2 coats of Nuln Oil, for example. But in this case, Iron Warriors is perfect because it's just such a dark, heavy silver. So when we just apply that Nuln Oil over the top, it gets a really, really nice kind of dark, heavy metallic out of it. Like I said, you could use something heavier like Black Templar if you wanted to, but I actually think this is probably for the best. And it's a little joke anyway to use Imperial Fists and Iron Warriors together on one model. See, they can live together in harmony. But what I did at this point is, rather than kind of try and self-determine what those alternate metallics were going to be, I just did all of the remaining details in Iron Warriors. With the silver all applied, we can then balance off the alternate metallics in order to just make sure that we don't absolutely kind of divide it into 3, but this way that we kind of create enough variation. And the color that I chose for this was Fulgurite Copper for the kind of back pots of the autocannons. This is the only place that I applied the Fulgurite Copper. It's a color that I haven't really used that much, but it's a very, very nice kind of copper color that we can shade down a little bit. Again, just a bit brighter so that our shading isn't as impactful, but it just has enough impact. If we go for too dark a color here, like Hachette Copper, we end up having to kind of layer it up to make it kind of a little bit brighter. Otherwise it just kind of becomes too heavy in terms of the metallics. So went with Fulgurite Copper. And then for our third metallic, just to kind of balance the model a little bit further, and also as we can see in our picture reference, there is a third color for like the kind of the raising pins and all these kinds of things. I went with my favorite metallic color, which is Castellax Bronze, just because it's a very Horus Heresy color. I very like it for kind of slightly more kind of mechanical details, or kind of the moving details of things like pistons and stuff, or for like, you know, cooling rods, and in this case these pins that I assume you would screw up and down in order to create elevation and stuff like that. Basically what I guess it's for. And there's a little shield on the top as well, a little shield generator I think it is, or it's a sensorium or something. We're also going to be applying the Castellax Bronze over the top of that. Like I said, I just think it's one of those colors that just screams Horus Heresy. It's just a very, very, very cool color, and I like to use it whenever I can. And because it's that simple a colour palette, all of the base coats are now on. So it's time to shade, as we often do, get all the base coats on and then shade things. So the first shade that I'm using is, as it's already been mentioned several times in this video and voiceover so far, is Nuln Oil. And that's going over the top of all of the silver and all of the black details. So just do it all in one fell swoop, as it were. And we don't need to thin this down either, because it's just going to supply enough kind of depth and heaviness on its own. And if there's a little kind of slightly darker spotting in some places, that's actually okay, because it just adds a little kind of natural weathering and stuff to the model anyway. So we just use that over the top of all of the silver and all of the black details. And of course our second shade, but third one in this video, is going to be some Agrax Earthshade, which always just adds that kind of really nice darker shading to any kind of the warmer metallics, such as the Fulgurite Copper and the Castellax Bronze. Just adds an element of brown over the top of what are quite brown anyway, but also they've just got a hint of red or orange or yellow to it. It's just a very, very good shade for that kind of thing. So over the top of the Castellax Bronze and over the top of the Fulgurite Copper goes the Agrax Earthshade. And naturally, now that the cannon is at Warhipster battle ready, it's time to take it to the next level. And, well, because it's such a simple colour palette, such a large model, and really such a simple model, it requires some simple highlights. So the highlights that we're going to be doing are dry brushes, and the first of them is Screaming Skull. And we're going to be using that over the top of all of the yellow. And that's just because it's kind of the nicest, brightest, sort of off-white yellow that we have available to us, but it can often act as quite a nice unifying dry brush. Ultimately, you could dry brush the entire model with Screaming Skull here, and it wouldn't look out of place. It would act as a pretty decent highlight for the silver, and for the Castellax Bronze, and the Fulgurite Copper, and indeed the black. But in this one, we ended up not doing that. We just ended up just doing this over the yellow. Now, we could use the Flash Gits yellow that we've used in the past for Imperial Fists, but that would kind of be better for a line highlighting thing, because it's much more, well, it's much more yellow for the start, and then we could have gone for a spot highlight of Dawn Yellow, for example, over the top of that. But like I said, I just wanted to keep things a little bit simple, so using some Screaming Skull here just absolutely made sense to me. Again, could dry brush it with Dawn Yellow, but it's very yellow, and that would make it very, very punishingly bright, and we don't want to do that. We just wanted to kind of be a little bit of a softer highlight, but also quite bright and still read as being a highlight. So a dry brush of Screaming Skull is the answer here. And our second dry brush of the piece is going to be some Dawnstone that we use over the top of the black details. And again, the reason here is that rather than line highlight it with Dawnstone and add some kind of spot highlights of some Administratum Grey maybe, because of all this silver being around, if you accidentally catch the silver with a Dawnstone, it's actually not going to read as a mistake. It's just going to be fine. So it kind of just made sense to dry brush this here with some Dawnstone. And again, the black details are all located within the Quad Accelerator Autocannon cannons, and with that kind of front panel as well. So just getting that Dawnstone over the top of it just made sense. Nice and simple, nice and quick to do. And for the third dry brush, and final dry brush, I went with some Ironbreaker. And Ironbreaker is just a really nice silver to highlight things with anyway. I think it's just perfect most of the time. It's not as bright as Stormhost Silver, but it's not as dark as, say, Iron Hand Steel, which is what we've used in the past, of course. So Ironbreaker just kind of sits across the two. And because we're not looking for, like, kind of bright industrial metallics, for example the Castellax Bronze and the Fulgurite Copper, Ironbreaker will also read quite nicely over the top of both those colours as well. And this is just that if it's Stormhost Silver, it's a little bit too bright and it will read as silver highlights across all of it. But if it's Ironbreaker, it won't read directly as silver over top of the things like the Fulgurite Copper, basically. It's just a really nice colour, and it's the one I use the most often. So, you know, that's also a consideration when highlighting your miniatures. What's the paints you like to use? In my case, it's Ironbreaker. And of course, what Warhipster tutorial wouldn't be complete without a final go over for the gems. And well, we've got all of our dry brushing on, the highlights are all done, so we ended up using 3 colours. Blood Angel's red for all of the round gems, Warp Lightning for the square gem, and Frostheart for the window, basically. And over the top of the metallics is absolutely fine. If you want these to be a little bit brighter, you can just layer in some Ironbreaker before doing this step. And that will just kind of help them read a little bit better. The dry brush should pick them up, but if it doesn't, you can just go in and add a little bit of Linebreaker. Linebreaker? Ironbreaker. Ironbreaker. We can layer in the Ironbreaker so that we get nice, bright, impactful gems and lenses and stuff like that. I mean, they're not gems, they are all lenses and windows. But I always call them gems or lenses. Depends on the video. If I'm painting a bunch of gems, I'll call them lenses. And if I'm painting a bunch of lenses, I'll call them gems. I don't know. There you have it, guys. It's all done now. So I hope you enjoyed this one. Kind of a slightly different take on a Contrast Plus painting video, but quite a meaningful one, I hope. You can use this video to paint the entire contents of the Saturnine box, should you so choose, and indeed any of the legions. You just replace the yellow with the legion colour. So Night Lords, the blue goes where the yellow is, Blood Angels where the yellow is, etc, etc. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that one, found it useful.
If you enjoyed this video, you love the channel and you'd like to support me further, you absolutely can do so by heading to patreon.com/warhipster, just like all of these wonderful, amazing people have done. And alternatively, you could become a YouTube channel member by clicking on the join button below, exactly like these fabulous folks have done, scrolling up on the screen before you. There are so many of you out there that it really takes my breath away, and I cannot thank you enough for everything you do, as without you I wouldn't be able to keep making these Contrast Plus videos. And if you really like this video and you want to send me a little thanks, just click on the thanks button just below this video. Don't forget to share it, like it, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and to make sure you stay up to date, don't forget to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Happy wargaming.